WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. I want to thank you for continuing your input to us at the show called We Should Know. That email address again is weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. Also, remember, if you want to just drop us a card or let us know what you think about a show or present a show, you can send it to that address, or you can send it to Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. That's We Should Know, Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. Our guest today, want to kind of get into this as quick as we can. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. The county manager, Sampson County, is with us. In 1972, Sampson County was started operating under the Board of Commissioners / County Manager form of government. The county manager serves as the local government chief executive officer, administrative officer, providing administration supervision for all departments, and actually reports directly to the commissioners. Ed Causey serves Sampson County in that position since 2010. That's been a few years, Ed. And once you were appointed, you came from 40 years service with the United States Department of Ag, which is rural development, specializing in financing and getting money to folks that need it in rural areas. I guess, Ed, when I look at your background and look at your master's degree in economics and your undergraduate in animal science and technology and poultry technology, probably the first question is, how did they talk you into coming to Sampson County and hanging out for almost 10 years now?
Actually, it was an interesting story. One of the commissioners by the name of Jarvis McClam actually came to visit me in my office one day and had understood I was thinking about retirement, and he looked at me and he says, Mr. Causey, he says, you're pretty darn good at loaning money. Why don't you think about coming on down to Sampson County and let's figure out if you're as good at paying it back as you are in making the loans. And that sort of set the mind to thinking and set the stage, and I applied, and here we are.
And I'm glad you mentioned Jarvis McClam. Commissioner McClam was chairman of the Board of Commissioners, a very outspoken advocate for people in his area, in his district, and for the county. What's occurred now? Let's just talk about because you got quite a bit of experience with the county. From that period of time, May 2010 to now, what's been your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge that I found out early on was understanding a particular board. And if you make one change in the board, your board has a different flavor. And if a manager is going to be effective in accomplishing things, you got to pick up what the difference is in the flavor of the board and be able to adjust in order to accommodate their desires and wishes.
Those changes over time, have you seen a significant change in the way the board approaches things? Does there seem to be a bit more unity? I know at one time, and I'm looking way back in 2010, even a little bit before you came, there seemed to be a lot of push and pull. I guess that's still there, but is there a quicker sense of coming together?
I would answer yes. I think there is a quicker sense. Now, part of it could be the fact is you've got a manager who has now been here 9 years as opposed to no time, so some of it could be my experience. I think the biggest credit that I would give this board is they ask a lot of questions, but they will also make a decision. And if you've been through a period where maybe it was difficult to make a decision, you get to the point that you appreciate an answer, whether it be yes or no. That lets a manager who is trying to look after all of the interests of the county well, I'll take the no answer and move forward on something else. And, you know, after all, a manager's got to remember that he's got two roles. Number one, he is the one person that reports directly to the board, that they can decide they don't need this person just because of personality or because it just doesn't fit or there's a discomfort in that. Is that right? And at the same time, that same person has got to represent 543 employees as well as the 65,000 residents, and local government commission and other regulatory parties looked at that county manager to help keep things on track and meet the fiscal responsibilities of the law.
You've done quite a bit since you've been here, and depending on which pot somebody wants to pick something out of, there's many of them, but one of them is you've tried to stabilize and kind of develop a plan for sustaining quality employees in the county.
Yes.
And that's been something I think that you kind of had on your plate from the time you took the job in 2010. Is that solidified now? Is that where you want it to be? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you would want all the employees to get, more raises and bigger raises, but is that formula working, the fact that you've got some kind of standard set where people knows where they can reach and whatever level they're at?
We have made a lot of improvements. In fact, in 2015, we approved the $3.7 million pay increase for employees that was implemented over 4 years. We had some other adjustments with benefits and whatever that we had to make, and I would tell you that we have made significant progress. To tell you that we do not, think about it, in 4 years, you can already determine that there are some job classifications that are out of date and in demand, and so it becomes a constant thing of looking to see what you need to adjust. To tell you that we're out of the woods, no, we're not. It's a competitive world out there, and if you've got skill sets that you need, if you're not paying an adequate range, we've got counties close enough by that people can move to. So it is in our best interest to always be competitive with our wages. And yes, we have done a lot of work, we've accomplished a lot, but we've got more work to do.
Skill sets always causes me to start thinking about technology and the content of what technology is. It's transforming the landscape in agriculture and just about everything. How do you see that impacting, and I'll use this kind of as an example so I can kind of close in that question a little bit. How do you see that impacting smaller rural counties? Is the whole issue of technology causing you to be able to be more efficient, have less people, or is it doing the reverse factor? Are you discovering more things that needs to be addressed?
Technology is a positive aid. Now, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not a technology guru, but I do have those working in the county that are. One of the things is, if you have read, we're doing a lot of work in customer service, particularly as it relates to economic development. And one of the things we're finding as we get into this is, in to improve customer service, our customer service at some level is going to be no better than our technology in the ability to get people information. So if I can save you as a consumer of county services, if I can give you the opportunity to tie in by computer or technology and get your service or get your permit or get whatever you need by the technology without a trip down to the county office, I would think that you would probably perceive that to be good customer service. So in addition to those one-on-one meetings and improvements that we're trying to do, we're also looking to make sure that that we're looking for the opportunities for technology to assist us. And being kind of an old country boy, I tend to think, well, let's put this in place and we're done. Well, what I have quickly learned is technology changes, and you can use technology in 2 or 3 years. It's probably going to be updated, and are you prepared and geared to do that? And a lot of that we're looking at the present time to see what we can do to improve.
Is there an expectation of the public growing significantly in that area of technology where their expectation is to be able to do business with the county via internet, via computer access? Do you have people going, well, why don't you have something online that maybe is not online now?
Yes, people are technology savvy. Now, I can't give you an exact answer, but I can tell you that is something that people are always looking and like to be able to get information. And quite frankly, when you get into economic development, you've got a lot of people that are coming in and looking at your county website and looking at a whole host of things that may be 1,000 miles away from you. So it is important to have good information available to people. At the same time I say that, I don't want to discount the importance of being able to give people a timely response and greeting and helpfulness when they walk into that door for a one-on-one conversation.
You mentioned economic development. I want to try to get this in the first segment if I can. The idea that we are where we are now, and the commissioners, both the chairman and the co-chair of the commissioners has sat where you are and talked about the importance of everyone being engaged in economic development. It's kind of everybody's role to get more people to the table and to bring more business in. How is that working thus far, and do you think that message is reaching people, and do they understand it?
There's a lot of work on the message to really equate to you what the level of understanding is. I don't know that I can do it. A lot of people that deal directly with county government understand where the emphasis is. So from that standpoint, we have made progress. When we get into this whole realm of economic development, our commissioners, I think, are quite thoughtful. You know, our current tax rate is 82.5 cents. Mm-hmm. They do not want the tax rate to increase. But as time changes, the cost of government are going to increase. So you've got to have increased revenue. So you've got one of two choices. That is either you can increase your tax rate, or you can go out and create those opportunities for business to develop, and hopefully that gives you the added tax base that will assist you in meeting the needs of government in subsequent days.
One of the things, and you've been on this show enough, you're kind of a regular, I guess, so you kind of know how things work here. One of the things I've always heard you say, and I've mentioned this in on other shows actually, the importance of knowing what the concerns are of the public is very important to you. You've always said if somebody comes to me with a problem or concern, it is always helpful to have some sense of resolution from that person. How do they think this can be resolved? What's the thoughts you're getting from people on how economic development and growth in business and industry? What are you hearing from people in that area?
I think there's a general interest in it, and people are generally interested and understand, I think, that we've got to have some industry. I'll have to admit, on one level, I'm looking at industrial development to increase revenues in order for me to better provide the services of county government. But at the same time, it goes down to a better quality of life. You do have people talking about the fact, well, I'd like to have industry here, so possibly my children may determine that they want to have a future life in Sampson County rather than to get their education and move somewhere else.
And that's always, I think, a factor. And as we go to break, I want to kind of come back and talk a little bit about that, because you and I have some kind of similar backgrounds with ag and how we grew up and the one-row tractors that we're familiar with and that kind of thing. But people are with expectations that sometimes out-expand the possibility of where we are. We'll be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We're talking with the county manager here in Sampson County, Ed Causey, about issues that face your life each and every day.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you again for being with us. And We Should Know is on there. We're coming from Star Communications, Channel 16. Also, we're coming to you on WCLN Radio. We're covering probably about 8 or 10 counties here in the eastern part of the state, and of course online. You can pick us up online. This show's uploaded to YouTube about 2 weeks after the original airing, so you can pick us up there if you want to go back and take a look at it. I also mentioned it's also published a summation in the Sampson Weekly newspaper, so if you want to pick up the summation of the show, you won't get the full content. We're talking with Ed Causey today. Ed, background and kind of picking up on the first segment, we were talking a little bit about that development issue and the expectation of the public. Does the average person that comes in that's ag, because ag is our biggest industry here if you look at it from an industry point of view, and some people don't necessarily put ag in the quote their definition of industry because it's something they grew up with like you and I did, but that is a huge industry here. When they come in and talk to you, or when you see them, and I know folks are pulling on you all the time because I've been in events where you're at and somebody will stop you. Let me tell you this. Are they looking at giving you some idea of what they've discovered, some advice on what they think ought to happen? What are the kinds of questions? Give me some specifics.
I think there is a general recognition that we need to do some things differently, and we need to be proactive. And if we're going to make economic development happen in Sampson County, then we need to take some initiative to do it. The first thing I would point out to you is if you're talking about economic development at a basic level in a county that's very successful with it, they have got what we call shovel-ready sites. These are sites that have been improved approved with all the environmental all the environmental certifications that they need, as well as the infrastructure. And so, if an industry generally, in many instances, when they come and looking and shopping and want to develop, they want to come in and buy and start development. They don't want to wait a year and a half or 2 years for you to get the infrastructure to them. They want it now. That being said, one of the things the commissioners did 2 years ago is we put $1.5 million in the Economic Development Fund, and we've agreed, as far as we can budget, to budget $250,000 a year. So that fund has got $2 million. Well, $2 million is significant money, but when you get to talking about buying sites and putting in infrastructure and doing a lot of development, the money is not nearly as much as what we think it might need to be at the end of the day. But it does tell people in Raleigh and other places that are inclined to help us with grants and whatever, these people are serious about it. So yes, there is a commitment there on behalf of the commissioners, and we're working very earnestly to try to make good decisions and begin to move out and start doing some positive things.
The big thing that, in fact, if you look at any report now, you can pull up any paperwork or go to any website, the big issue is this need to have broadband and high-speed broadband, particularly in rural areas. As a rural economic person for years, for 30 years, and then into this job, you've been immersed in that world. Have you seen anything quite as aggressive as what the folks are demanding when it comes to that? Just about every meeting I go to, somebody goes, well, I want more than 4 megabytes. I got to have 200, and it's even in the agriculture community, because there's so many issues now driving ag that's data-based and speed-based. Even the operation of equipment, has some tie to that.
People are looking for services, and they want the very best services possible.
No matter where you live.
No matter where you live, and if you go and develop industry, since that's sort of where we're focusing this conversation, you've got to be prepared to make sure they got the best technology and the opportunity to get the best technology possible. And if you don't, you may not finish as well as you want in the pursuit of getting good companies to come.
There's always been this play, and you can remember as I can, back during that era of time, that not only with telephones but electricity and other kinds of things in rural areas, it was really in a situation you had to have government support to get it to the rural areas, simply because of density of population. So has anything really changed in that the same kind of thing is now occurring with this, quote, high-speed internet and so forth?
I would think it's just, it is, in one sense, it's more of the same, because if anybody's got a good development program for any kind of infrastructure in rural areas, it's got to also be dependent on resources that they can engage and put into it, but they also need to be able to leverage to get other grants. And there's a host of grants at the state level that would be available to us if we found particular sites that we want to develop.
We've seen some of those kinds of programs put into play in the legislature, and now at this period of time, it seems that there's such aggressive polarization there between parties and party isolation that it seems it's going to be hard to get anything through the General Assembly that's not going to be vetoed by the governor unless there's other things tied to it. I know you don't see that much on the local level, but how does that impact a local level if you can't get those grants through? I know we saw just recently in the local media, several $1 million that was available. It could be available to the county, but if it can't clear the legislature, there's no need for you guys to start working on paperwork locally if it's not going to get out.
Well, that is largely true, but at the same time, we got to keep our focus on the ball and where we're going, whether it be 1 year or 2 years out. So we cannot let short-term disparities discourage us. We have got to keep focused on what our long-term approach is and our long-term goals and stay with it. Any number of things in the legislature elsewhere could cause us a delay. At the same time, they can come up with a program next year that enhances our ability. So instead of looking at my ball as being ahead half empty, I'm going to look at the bottle as being half full, stay with the program. We don't have another choice. And if you think about what our commissioner for ourselves, our Chairman Wooten, he uses the term, he's no longer going to stand in line. He's going to the front of the line. Instead of waiting to see what somebody's going to do for him, he's going to push to see what he can provide and then get it leveraged to get other resources. So I think that is the approach our entire board is taking. And when we sit here and talk about what we're going to accomplish, I'm not telling you we're going to accomplish anything in 6 months. And I'm not going to tell you we're going to accomplish anything by next year this time. But what I will tell you is at the end of the day, we will have accomplished more than if we sat back and did nothing and waited for it to come to us.
A while back, I was very fortunate to be able to get Dr. Howerton to come in and have a conversation about health care. One of the challenges we've got in this county, like probably 5 or 6 counties now that still have independent hospitals, nonprofits, if you will, that's not affiliated. That seems to be an ongoing, and I'll use the word crisis in a way for health care for smaller rural counties, and the governor's aware of that, and there's a lot of conversation. Is there anything that you've seen that really puts any meat on the bones other than dealing with the Medicaid program in the state?
I had a conversation with a person yesterday who had been in and was talking to their doctor, and the doctor was said because of the lack of Medicaid, he was unable to get all of the money he needed just to break even for his services. And I think he was saying he had a percentage of like 30-40% of his clients that came in are patients that did not have money even through Medicaid or Medicare to pay for it. I'm not in a position to sit here and make the judgment because I don't think I understand all of the particulars. But it is a challenge, and healthcare is a challenge. I can tell you myself, I went in for a routine checkup a few weeks ago and ended up with a $700 bill for 30 minutes in a general practitioner's office because of the blood test and whatever we were doing. My insurance was out of their system. Was not out of their system, so I paid $700. So yes, I understand as much as I can without having a major health crisis what the challenge is for the people that we serve.
And I think part of that too is in kind of looking at this in a big picture way. There's so many folks that does not even have that 700, and so therefore that bill remains suspended, and for lack of a better phrase, the buck stops with the CEO of the hospital because somehow he's got to figure out, okay, I've got this 700 times maybe 400 or 500 that is not paid because you've got that idea. And a lot of folks do this simply because they don't have a choice. They go to the ER because they got to have help, but they know they don't have any resources when to go in, cash-wise or otherwise.
That is correct.
And so Medicaid then becomes the question, why don't we pass more Medicaid programs? Why don't we have more Medicaid? And there's this conversation about that. How does that impact the county?
It does have an impact because because when people can't get services anywhere else, they come to our local health department. And if you come to the local health department, we're required to give you what services are available, whether you can pay for it or not. So if those services are not available somewhere, it does have an impact. And it goes back to the old thing: if there is a challenge with the economy, when you're talking about operating like a business, the demand for our services when there's an economic downturn generally goes up as opposed to being stable, so we don't have the same opportunities that some other people have if you're running a private business. And I can tell you, even from the county's insurance, we have, even in our insurance program, which is maybe a microcosm, we're going to have some changes probably that's going to occur next year. We're $150,000 that we are self-insured, and then we have insurance above that. But because of the cost of operating our program, we're going to have to do some evaluation on the kind of services we're going to offer. We're going to have major adjustments, no, but the demands and the cost are driving us to consider making changes. And when you consider the numbers of people that are going out and seeking medical services don't have the ability to pay for them, is that part of the reason why the services that we're paying through our insurance program are driving us up? So yeah, it becomes a major concern. One person's inability to get medical service, in one sense, I do agree, does have an effect on everybody, directly or indirectly.
And you've seen all this change since your tenure as county manager here in this county. You've seen significant shifts in health care.
Yes, sir.
And particularly as it relates to the cost of that health care, both that the county has to pay for the employees as well as what the employees has to pay out.
That's exactly right.
So I guess part of that question then, does that create a morale issue? Does that create an issue for you in attracting more and better employees? And maybe we'll get to that when we come back from break, because I want to kind of segue into another subject a little bit related to economic development. But that to me is kind of a core of where we are in everything we do, because folks have a reason they come to an area. They want to, they want to have something to look after a family. They want the amenities to the area. So when we come back, we'll kind of challenge that and see where we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take another break. Ed Causey is our county manager here in Sampson County, which is kind of similar to a lot of the rural areas. The challenges, what's going on.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that has a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us today. Ed Causey. Ed Causey is the county manager of Sampson County. A tremendous amount of responsibility here in the county, especially for the past 9 years. This past May,
yes,
you've
sir.
been the county manager. There's been a lot of changes. When we went to break, we were talking about health care. Health care, to some degree, drives the dynamic of employees with the county, but the big picture issue, it drives everything else with the county, because there's a certain expectation there, and you were talking as we kind of went to break how that has kind of changed some of the things in the way you do business. Talk a little bit more about that.
Talk about healthcare for just a minute. I can remember, if I go back to the dark ages when I first hit the employment field, you paid your X dollars for your insurance on month, and it really didn't matter. You just went down to the doctor's office, sought your service, and the insurance would pay.
That's correct.
Now, in order for families to be successful, they've got to take a real interest in their healthcare. Even the insurance that we provide, they've got to know where they can get their best deal on services. They've got to know what the co-pays are. They've got to understand when there's a chance for generic drugs. So they can't just stop with, I'm signing up for insurance. So the dynamic of health care is increased for the county, but it's probably increased even more for the individual consumer, particularly at the county level, and I presume everything else.
And that creates a kind of not only a more in-depth review of the individual, but it creates another area of complexity that person's got to deal with.
Yes.
I mean, they've got a job, so therefore they know what their hours are, they know what their jobs are, they know how to function. But now they got this whole other accounting procedure. So it creates a management issue as it relates to morale for folks.
I worked for the federal government for 35 plus years, whatever it was. I don't ever remember anybody having a conversation. We got increases in health insurance, and they were usually very insignificant. You just took it. No, but we never had thought, nobody ever thought about having a conversation to tell people what drives the cost of insurance. At this point in time, I can tell you, with the cost of insurance becomes so significant with what we're trying to do for our employees, we're beginning to have those conversations because we're doing something I've never heard of in 40 years. We're trying to get employees to understand not only their health insurance, but how we go about acquiring health insurance and how the costs drive, because at some point in time, they've got to understand when there are going to be changes in what their premium is going to be paid or what their benefits are. And we're driven by the market and what we can afford. So yes, over time, there will be changes, and I don't expect us to be having less conversations in the future than what we're having now.
Well, and I know in the past years we've had a number of conversations about this particular issue, and I guess the idea behind that is sustaining a quality workforce as it relates to county employees.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's also broader than
Yes.
that, the replication of that with business, industry, and other kinds of places. Do you see a challenge for the sustainability of Sampson Regional Medical Center?
I don't have enough. I think the fact that they are a local independent hospital, they've got a challenge just innately by the circumstance and the fact we've got a population of 65,000 people in the county. And I would say if we look at the health crisis, their challenges probably at many levels are much greater than the challenges I face in some other arenas on a day-to-day basis. But to predict, but I would tell you from my observations of what they have done in the past, they do a pretty good job of understanding what their cost centers are and trying to adapt the needs to the future. So I believe if anybody can sustain and anybody can make it through the health crisis, our local hospital can, because it does appear we've got good leadership.
And I think the other thing that I want to kind of clarify, and I seem like I've done this a number of times on the show talking with different people that understand this business, is the county does not support financially. The hospital is not a department of county government. It's an independent in the sense that it's nonprofit, so therefore it generates its money through the services it renders. They have to balance a budget.
Yes.
I'm sure the county supports them in a certain way, but they are not another department of county government.
That is correct. The hospital is an independent entity. There are some of the facilities over there that were originally developed and built and financed by the county, and we do have an interest. But the county has not put any money into the local hospital, certainly in the 9 years that I have been here, and we don't expect to in the foreseeable future. And I think that's a credit to their operations during these difficult times.
So I guess really if you look at it, the dwindling numbers of independent hospitals, the last I looked was around 5 or 6 in the state still left, it says a lot to the fact of the management, of the way things are being administered, the survivability. If they end up being one of the last 3 or 4 in the state, you really got to give them kudos. That's a great job.
Yes, that is exactly right.
So I want to kind of segue because I definitely want to get into this. Recently, and I guess recently this kind of came to mind because I recall you and I talking about this when this particular company was looking at coming to Sampson County called Enviva. This company is something that was looked at and touted as a very positive impact for this area. Employability, numbers up, all of that has come true. Now we're facing a somewhat of a pushback from what, and again, I'm going to ask the question based on clarifying for me, so maybe it'll help clarify for a lot of other folks. When I look at that, what I saw was a company asking a permit to ensure that they sustained a quality environment function within that organization. Now we've seen a number of folks from outside, some folks from inside, touting that they shouldn't get a permit to continue to maintain quality air, and which would end up stymieing the company's ability to grow. It's really it's one of those points again where there seems to be everybody goes to their corners and they hold on, and there's not a sense of understanding. Help us understand why this company is not only important for us, but look at it on a long-term basis. What does it mean to our tax base? What does it mean for schools that need more schools built in the next few years, and computer technology in the schools? What does that company mean?
The company, let me address this on a couple of levels. First of all, when you get into the environmental, I don't know that I have the expertise to debate with you the particulates in the air and what.
Yeah, I have trouble dealing with global warming. I'm just trying to.
So I have a little bit of challenge. I can tell you is sometimes we need to all step back and think about the extremes that we could all have. The best thing I could possibly do to ensure my longevity from a health standpoint, I probably ought to go home and go in and close my door and never walk out. Because if I walk outside, I can get hot and have a heat stroke. If I get in my car, I can have an automobile accident. My point being is nothing we can do to promote a good that does not have some downside or some challenges that are inherent to it. When I come back to Enviva, I would tell you they have been an economic boon to the county. I cannot give you the specific numbers, but I think it was like $120 million investment. I think the first year that they came online, even with the tax incentives, I think we were able to increase the per student allocation of what we give the schools by about $70, which was probably the most significant increase since I have been here. They have been a good partner. They're on our water system. They're purchasing a lot of water, which actually helps keep the cost of water production in the county down, which actually helps us keep the rates for all of our other residential customers on an even keel. So I would tell you from that standpoint, and we are an agriculture county, and we do have a lot of timber, and so it does appear to me that it is an industry that seems to be compatible with many of the things that we want to accomplish.
And a lot of folks, in fact, just I think it was just past week I was talking with Eileen Coyd and Hunter Rhodes about ag. A lot of people don't see forestry as part of ag, but it's a huge part of agriculture.
It's a huge part.
The other part of Enviva that I want you to touch on is that one of the things that Enviva produces, these pellets, it actually does away with a concern a lot of folks have, environmentalists, about coal production. So the utilization of the pellets in England and other places allows those folks not to use so much coal that, again, is touted to be a problem for the environment. So what are we missing? What do you, when I hear you talk and then I read some of the commentary of other folks that these organizations, if you will, that are really, kind of churning up the water on this, how do we level that out a little bit and say, wait a minute, it takes a little of both? There's always going to be some impact. At some point in time, there's going to be impact for anything. But how do we get folks that are huge advocates and community advocates to understand where this is, where are we missing it?
If we look at today's world and politics in general, we see fringe views or extreme views on both sides of the equation that seem to be driving the conversations. At the end of the day, to suggest that there's no one that wants to protect the environment and do environmentally safe things, to me is a little bit is a little bit off the mark, because I just don't see that. So the question is when we're talking, obviously we need to get the economic boons and encourage industry, and at the same time we need to approach some of this development with some reasonableness to allow things to happen and for us to progress forward. If there was clearly a violation in air permits or something that was damaging to the environment, I think the county would be the first ones to be encouraging Enviva. But it appears to me at this point in time, Enviva is being proactive into trying to do some of the improvements on their own and initiate them in order to get the permits and provide better development for the future.
Would this be even a question if they had not legitimately applied for a permit with the Department of Environment, with the state, to modify something to improve the output?
I think.
So once that was almost like a red flag?
Yes.
A moment that folks may seize on?
Yes.
Going forward, I think that's going to be an issue, and folks, I was talking with a guy, of course, John Swope's done a great job in trying to get a lot of these things here, and in conversations in the past, I've seen his, coolness in making sure we try to make it as homogeneous as possible. But when we come back, I want to touch on one more point on the Enviva thing, but we're going to take a break. And as we do that, as we go to break, I want to encourage folks to come back and listen to the specifics of what we're talking about, because we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, your future and helping you better understand how the county operates through the eyes of the person that sits in the vortex in that seat each and every day.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're coming up on our last segment. We're talking to county managers. There's so many issues when I get Mr. Ed Causey in this room with me that sometimes, Ed, you'll look at me and go, well, I'm not sure how much we got to talk about. I think we could do a semester. I might suggest to Dr. Starling that we set up a semester course for folks on understanding local government, and we could kind of go through it. But we were talking about Enviva. I want to kind of get back to another point that we mentioned off air. With companies like Enviva and industry and other good partners out there looking for places to go, or where do I want to develop my next project, those kinds of things. When they see this kind of activity, does that create pause for them? Do I really want to go there? Because I know we're going to have everything's going to have an environmental impact. If you build a house, you got an environmental impact. So everything's got a part of an environmental impact. Does that drive the potential for folks to go in another place?
Our consultants tell us that industry wants to go where the communities are receptive to their participation. If an industry, I think, knows that there's going to be a lot of resistance in a particular community versus other places that they can go, I would tell you that common sense says that they're probably going to evaluate those opportunities very carefully before they invest the time and resources to deal with views that are not consistent with what they're wanting to accomplish.
For folks that have a concern with this, would it be appropriate to say, as you've said in the past, if you got a concern, call the county manager's office, set up a time either to meet, but also bring a solution?
Well, we're always, if you're talking about in vivo,
or any concern that's going on.
If you're talking about in vivo specifically, that's a permitting issue, and we're sort of out of that league, and that's something that we would refer to the state. If anybody has got particular issues that interest in, we always are encouraging people to contact us. But I am particularly interested in those people that will share with me a problem and then a reasonable solution, because it helps you. I would share one thing with you, and I don't think I have shared with this. When I was with USDA, I got selected one time to be one of 4 people that got to go to Washington every quarter for 3 days, and at the end of it, you got to go in and talk to the administrator about issues that you thought were in the field. But however, there was one caveat that he put onto that. You were not allowed to go in with any issue to talk to him and tell him there was a problem unless you had a viable solution to offer for its fixing. Because he would quickly tell you he knew what the problems were. What he needed was solutions. So if a problem's important to you, he would tell us, come in with a solution. And I find that obviously we would listen to anybody, but those people that have good ideas, people would be surprised what will resonate that may not appear to have resonated at the point they make the statement.
So I think that's a positive thing from where I sit, is that we do discover that oftentimes some of the best ideas come in from the fringe of the organization, and I think there's been a lot of studies that point at that. So if somebody's got an idea, a solution for something, that has merit, give you a call.
I would tell you that when I came here in 2010, one of the first issues that I heard, and it was brought by somebody in the public, that there was an issue with our GIS system and whether we had good mapping and things of that nature. When we looked at it, we've determined that individual was correct, and that was one of the first initiatives we set about to correct. I would think we may have found it, but I'm inclined to believe we probably would not have discovered that or put the importance to it as quickly as we did had the citizen not come in.
So the message is, again, and I want to kind of segue so we'll have time to cover this, and this is, I guess, probably one of the most important things that folks should be concerned about, and that's the budget. This year, $62.6 million, close to $63 million budget was approved. It seemed to be seamless. The pictures that were out and the local media coverage, everybody was there, hands raised, boom, and it was done. Talk to me about the background a little bit. How hard was it to pull this together and to make this, what appeared from the outside to be an easy decision?
Well, I would tell you that don't assume that the commissioners spent very little time on the budget. One of the things that what we did is we got heavy duty into the budget back in the middle part of March, and as issues would come up, I would communicate with the commissioners when they were in the office or by telephone or visiting or whatever. These are the kinds of issues we're facing. Can you give me some direction? And there was an awful lot of input, and there was an awful lot of adjustment based on that. I would tell you that this year's budget for me was more challenging than the last two just because of the circle. I don't think there was a particular reason, but yes, it was a little bit more challenging.
One of the things, and you were quoted in one local news article, you were quoted as saying, despite a sound financial position, Causey shared concerns about future cash flow and stagnant county growth.
Yes.
You want to expand on that a little bit?
I would. I would tell you it comes back, and I tried to compare the county government to a family's individual budget. It's the same thing. I would tell you that the financial position of the county is sound. I think we had about 29% availability of money in the general fund when the state requires 8. We would like that to be about 35, so we're on a positive track. I think we're funding our reserves, and we've done some things for our employees. However, our growth in what is called just the taxes, I think our first projection was not but about $500,000. $500,000 is, if that's the only increase in revenue that we have over time, will create some challenges down the road. Just because our population is getting older, we need to do more aging services. We will have to support the Department of Social Services and the Health Department. Think about the challenges out there. If your population grows or if incomes are not, there's going to be more challenges for the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement. So there's always opportunity. And let us don't forget the schools. Okay, we're doing a good job in one sense of trying to fund the schools, and we're doing this on a proportion of giving them an increase based on what our increase is in revenues. But I've got some concerns. Are those increases enough to sustain the schools moving forward in the future?
And when you look at this budget, I want to encourage people to go online and look at it, because you're talking a 500-plus page budget.
Yes.
That gets very specific. For folks that may be thinking, well, there's a lot of this stuff that we don't know, you can go online. I mean, it's just simple as going to the county website and clicking twice, and there it is in front of you, and it's pulled up in a PDF file. But I encourage folks to go look at that. Sometimes that answers the question before the anxiety, if that makes sense. It puts it, for me, in big perspective. But you touched on a couple of things, I think 2 key things that's big, when I say big, that has a big chunk of the county budget, and that's education and, of course, criminal justice, law enforcement, sheriff's budget, and others. That has 2 big pieces, sheriff being obviously less than education, but at the same time, when we look at that, is there a way to pare that down anyway for either one of those areas? Or, as you just mentioned, do you see a continued expansion need in finances to maintain those departments?
I would offer you 2 things. First of all, on the school side, I'm not an education expert. The only thing I can look at is the monies we give the state versus what the state average is on a per child basis. And ours is significantly less. We're in probably the bottom 25% of what we give on a per child basis. And when you look at the ruralness of our system, we automatically have increased challenges from transportation to communication with all the schools that are being operated. So yes, there's no doubt that I inherently understand generically that they have got challenges with their budget, and I'm not seeing at this point in time how that is likely to lessen over time based on what I see being forecasted from the state. So yes, there is a need, and I think the motivation of our commissioners is they recognize we need to be putting more into our schools. And we are using currently on the operations side of this, we're using a funding formula, which we determined several years ago what percentage they had been receiving of our increased budget, which is about 20%. So we basically budget on the basis that whatever increase we have in the general tax revenues, that we're going to give the schools an additional 20% of that. And then if we can justify more, depending on what the circumstances, we try. So at least we're trying, and understand my answer, I'm telling you that we are proportionately considering them as much as we could. Anybody can make the argument that we probably should, that we could do more, but it goes back to when I'm critiquing the state. At the same time I say the state ought to do this, I got to think in terms of the other issues that they've got to deal with as well.
While we're on schools, question, I want to try to get this in. We're going to be coming up to closure here in a minute. But is the state of North Carolina, do you see the state of North Carolina as responsible for building schools as far as construction, capital money, and particularly in the Hopton, Newton Grove area where the oldest school, one of the oldest schools, Hopton High School, do you see that as part or a significant part of state funds?
I'm expecting that to be a significant part of State Farm. See, one of the challenges we got here when we built the schools, which I financed some time back, is the county committed a significant amount of lottery money for the debt reserve, and that was basically understood by everybody. So if we did not have the school debt, we would have some additional resources to either assimilate and accumulate for additional school construction, or we could be using it for other things. But
for parents in the Hopkins School District and the Newton Grove District that would say to me, I'm sure they probably have to you too, or say, look, we need a new school up here. We need somebody. What would you say to parents that want to make something like that happen? What should be their first step?
Well, and I think they probably have done the first step, which is communicate that to their local school board, and
I think they've done that, yeah.
And the local school board is going to have to talk to us, and we've had numbers of conversations. There's two ways it can be considered. Is number one, the county could agree to request to get authorization for a bond referendum, in which historically, if you're doing a bond referendum for just something that's going to affect a small area, it is not as likely that would pass as it would be if there was a particular program that you were having a bond referendum for which the whole county got benefits. The second thing is you can do financing through the participation bonds, as the county has chosen to do before. Unfortunately, the county's got $140 million of existing debt, and we really don't see that we got the capacity to borrow a whole lot of additional money.
I want to thank you for addressing that question, which could be a whole program. Again, talking about time and what we're going to talk about. We could do a whole program, and maybe that's something we need to do in the future. I want to thank you for being with us today, and as always, taking your time out of a very busy day to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking to the county manager, Ed Causey, here in Sampson County. We look forward to seeing you again next week on this show.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.